Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hops Geek News, your home for comic books, movies, TV shows, and typically, sometimes we feature a beer of the week. I am Matt. Alongside me is Lauren, as always. And I'm going to go ahead and say this is a returning guest because at MegaCon we got to chat. However, only I got to hear the audio that happened. And if you know who we're talking about, Jeremy Adams is coming to join us to talk about some Aquaman, which, if you've been following along my reviews, and also, Aquaman is in my holy trinity of characters, there's a fantastic run out, 5 issues so far that we're going to talk about. And then there's a little bit of Supernatural we're going to talk about because the man himself might have just written one of the best episodes of Supernatural. So, Hops Geek News, any podcasting platform, any social media platform. And I themed my beer exquisitely today because I picked Trillium's West Coast style IPA. It's called Country Squire. We're talking with a wonderful writer. So I figured, Country Squire, it was a dad joke. I mean, there's like 3 dads out there that are probably going to laugh at this. I thought it was funny. I'm sending the picture to Lauren giggling like,
I thought you sent it because it's in the inside of a car. I was like, oh, it kind of looks like an Impala, but I didn't have my glasses on, so I thought that's what you were going for.
It's like, kids Squire. Okay. Anyways, Lauren, hi, Lauren. Did you grab
it's because I'm a mom. I actually did. I had one last Cosmic Cowboy from Family Business Brewing in my Family Business beer glass, which obviously is owned by Jensen Ackles.
Yes.
I loved the brewery when they were open, but you can still get some of their beer on Tavor. So that's what I've been doing to stock up. But also in the Aquaman comic, you got a little bit of family business going on there too.
Yes. A segue. What a segue.
That's what we pay for.
So that's what I'm drinking. It's a great classic IPA.
That's awesome.
It's true. But that beautiful voice you hear is Jeremy. And we did get to chat. But one thing we always like to do to kick off, Jeremy, is we love to know everybody's got an origin story. Every superhero has an origin story. So what is your comic origin story? How did you get into the world of comics, writing? What lit the fire for you?
So my father had drawn some comics for DC Comics back in 70 something. And my parents were divorced very early on when I was about 5. And so I just remember always having comics and superheroes around because I knew that he did some of that stuff. But when they got divorced, I think, you tend to try to like gravitate to be more like, hey, that's my dad. He likes this stuff. So I like that stuff. So you kind of take on. And so I definitely was taking on until it became my own, which is like when we'd see him, he'd give us some graphic novels and stuff. But I would save up my money and hit the spinner rack, and Superpowers came out at that time and Secret Wars came out at that time. And it just felt so big. And I was really addicted to that stuff. And then the writing aspect of it, the thing about it, I just loved comic books a ton. And then you hit that junior high era where you're reading everything you get your fingers on. Yeah. And it was like, Stephen King blows through your peer group. Like you're just all
yes. It's funny. This is like the 3rd week in a row we've had Stephen King mentioned. We're starting to have like a Stan Lee Stephen King cameo now.
Actually, your friend that we talked to the other day, he recommended a Stephen King book, and I already ordered it.
On writing?
He recommended Duma Key, and I hadn't read that one. So
his book on writing is like the greatest book about writing, but it's also a autobiography that Stephen King does. But Stephen King and then Dragonlance Chronicles like hit me like a thunderbolt. And through junior high, I remember writing stuff for class, and it would get everybody laughing. And that was such a massive high. I mean, such a massive high.
Yeah, especially at that age.
Yeah. And then it was like teachers would kind of say, hey, you're really good at this or whatever. And that really kept me going. But I didn't.
My teachers told me I would never make it out of 8th grade. That's not fair.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, I never had a concept about college or anything. It was just like me and my buddies like to make movies and whatever. So I did find myself in a circuitous route going to a college and becoming a film major and moving out to LA and eventually, started plugging away writing. And eventually, Jim Krieg, who's my mentor, it's a particular religious story, but he gave me my first job in the industry in animation on Green Lantern, the animated series. And then from there, it was kind of like fits and starts, and I would be a stay-at-home dad, and I would get like a little ghostwriting assignment, or I'd get to be able to do some backup stuff on a video game. And then suddenly a script would come in and then and then I started getting more and more things at Warner Brothers and more things with Lego, and that started spiraling. And then the Supernatural thing happened, obviously, and I got on the show. And around that time, I got a call. I was working at Supernatural, and I got a call at my office there that was like, "Hey, they want a bunch of animation writers that have worked on superhero shows to come over to DC offices because they want to hire a bunch of DC animation writers for writing comics." I've been trying to break into comics for decades, you know,
Wow.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is it! I can't believe this is it!" And I go in there with my friend Tim Sheridan and Megan Fitzmartin and Josie Campbell and a bunch of people, and we're all from animation. And Dan DiDio is like, "You guys are going to write everything," and oh my gosh. And he's telling us this whole plan for 5G. And so we pitched some things, and then he got let go. And I thought, oh no, there goes my dream.
Yeah.
But my name was on a list, and I got a call from an editor and it says, "Hey, your name's on a list. Would you do some backups?" And I was like, "Oh, 100%. I'll do whatever you want." And I did a couple backups in a Suicide Squad Future State, and then a Superman World at War backup. And there were only like 4 issues, I think. And then I get a call, and Mike Cotton, the editor, he's like, "Hey, you have any ideas for Flash?" And I'm like, "Bro, I'm a nerd of a certain age. I have ideas for everything."
Listen up. I'm glad you asked. Put
And
down
I
like
pitched him a thing, and he goes, "All right, Flash is yours." And that was it. It was that simple. And suddenly I took
Flash
on
is yours. Wow.
And they said, like, "You'll be lucky if you get 12 issues." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then it was like 36 issues later, and they were just like, "Hey, we got to change. We need a new tonal direction, but we want you to do Green Lantern." And so I've been doing
Wow.
Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps and Aquaman now for a while. I mean,
Yeah.
not that long, but yeah, I mean, writing as a career is a really weird thing because you just don't know what's going to get you your next job. And in animation, particularly, you're always looking a couple months down the road because it doesn't pay that well, and comic books don't pay that well. So you kind of have to start amassing a lot of things. And,
Mm.
I spent a long time working at Blockbuster and being an executive assistant, doing tour guides at Paramount Pictures, and, just like just a swath of weird jobs, all centered kind of circling around movies and television and stuff and
Yeah.
entertainment. But comic books has been incredibly fulfilling, and it's been great. I feel very lucky.
Well, I mean, not for nothing, but I would say you've done a pretty good job because you've inked not long ago a DC exclusive deal
Yeah.
like that. So what is that like for you? Your dad drew for DC.
Yeah.
You've been trying to break in, and DC is like your first quote unquote big break into the comic world. So
Yeah.
how has that full circle moment have been for you?
It's super surreal. It's very humbling because you feel like it's a certain amount of validation. Like they want to stick you around. They either want you to stay around because they like your work, or they just don't want you to go over there.
Either way, you're like, I'm
Either way,
fine.
I'm
I'm playing
okay.
with Green Lantern. I'm playing
Yeah.
with Aquaman, Flash. Like this is a dream come true.
I mean, what's funny about it is before they offered me exclusive, I was doing all those books. So they were like, he's doing a lot of our books, maybe we should, so it does feel like a vote of confidence, maybe, I don't know. I just keep writing and keep putting things down, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And comic book writing is a really peculiar thing. It's its own little particular craft. And you're talking about what amounts to like an episode of television once a month. So, there's a level of like having to recap things. And I always feel like pacing is really important, and the page turn's really important. And I still feel like I'm just learning a ton. And now on top of that, I'm doing 4 books a month. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm done with Aquaman. Now I can go to Flash Gordon. Oh, okay. Now I can go to Green Lantern. So you kind of like brain switch, but it's a great problem to have.
Right. I mean, it's especially Aquaman too, who this run I have been championing. It's something I've been really excited for. Now with Aquaman, because I've been, Lauren, I got her. The fact that I've got Lauren, you've got Lauren reading an Aquaman book, for example, and that's not something I ever thought would happen.
5 right here.
Right on.
Namor is one of my favorite Marvel characters because I'm a sucker for the ocean. So I mean, they're very, very similar.
Yeah.
But I think what you've done a great job of in something is, how was it for you trying to find the right tone with Aquaman? Because I know everybody goes to that joke of, oh, he talks to fish. But I think what you've done very well, and even in this latest issue, I've got almost like Harrison Ford style comedy vibes from him. Was that
What,
something
like
you kind of like?
Indiana Jones kind
That's
of
what I was
stuff?
thinking. Like the
Oh,
latest
I see that.
issue 5, maybe think of Indiana Jones, but also he's very stoic, but he has that funny, dry humor at times. So,
Hmm.
how did you play in this world of Aquaman, getting that tone right?
Uh, whether or not it's right, I don't know.
I think it's
Because
right. I
I
love it.
appreciate it. I mean, I get. It's so fun. Uh, this is the thing. I'm an incredibly accessible creator that comes with a lot of good and a lot of bad. So, I'll get people very complimentary, but I'll get a lot of people that are just angry Mira's not in it, or they're angry that it's not all about, Garth or politics and in underwater and stuff. And it's just,
It's
you just, as a
crazy.
writer, you're just trying to figure out how to get into it the way that you can get into it. And it's called Aquaman. I think part of the reason is because I like this character too, but how much do I actually know about this character? I grew up with Super Friends. I loved him in Batman Brave and the Bold. I think the movies are cool. I read some of the Peter David stuff, which is cool, but out of continuity. It's like, what do I really know about him internally? And there's always something with the different characters that stick out. Like with Wally West, it was like that was a very natural thing because he's a dad with 2 kids and married to an incredible
Right.
woman and has a weird job, and like that makes sense to me. Hal Jordan was much more going. What stuck out was like, I wonder how much money is in his checking account. Like that was
I
like,
mean, yeah, he was a pilot and then, Space Cop.
pilot's gone. He's gone for a long time, and I'm just kind of like, oh, she's a schlub. And with Aquaman, I just keep thinking like he was raised on the surface. I'm like, I wonder if he misses hamburgers. There's like this element of like people really lean into him being king and husband type thing, and that's why I started out like this isn't about this. This isn't about these pieces of his personality, and this is about him being this other thing and finding it and really finding it. And to a degree, I'm kind of doing with Flash Gordon a little bit. Is these characters don't have that much in terms of their childhood, and so I do a lot of flashbacks with him and his dad,
Hmm.
and kind of those conversations about what his dad's input into his life about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a king, what it means to be a stand-up individual, and how that shapes him and how it's going to shape him in the story. This story is, I've said it all along, is kind of 3 acts, and this is the first act, and the first act will kind of end around issue 8, and then we'll go to the next act, and we'll go to the next act. And but with Aquaman, it is, there are like happy accidents. Like editorial says, hey, we have this absolute power. We're switching up people's powers. We
Yeah.
kind of like him to have Mira's power. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So that ended up being such a huge part of,
That works really well for
yeah,
me.
I
I
think so.
love that aspect.
And just being able to go, oh, well, if he can bend water, then he can move mud. If he can bend water, he can blend blood. He can do all sorts of things.
Right. It opens so many more doors.
And he does it at a remedial level. Like he's not doing super complicated constructs like Mira could.
Right.
But you also have this Taken element, right, where his entire family's gone. There's this thing called the Blue. There's this character called Dagon, and then he starts picking up kind of a band of merry men along the way, whether it's the Lady of the Lake or it's Arion or now Nemo.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When
I
yes,
love
I told
that.
Lauren. So that was something I was reading was, hey, there's a really fun character that gets introduced in issue 5 that I never would have thought to have seen in an Aquaman comic. But
Right.
when you're reading, again, it works so well. Like Nemo's there, and
Right.
now
And
Nemo's
you
along
even
for the
get
ride.
the
And it's
Nautilus is
amazing.
important. So how
Yeah.
did that come about that you decided to integrate that into an Aquaman
Oh my
comic?
gosh, we were in Japan. There's this
Oh.
whole thing in Disney Sea, and it's all 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, how
And I'm like,
fun.
this is freaking amazing. Like I was so pumped about it. I got so supercharged creatively. And my kids wanted to watch 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I go, let's watch it. And then I just started doing research, and my brain started moving. I was like, why isn't he in this? This is great. We can have like a base of operations. And part of it is like, I don't, and I get into these little tips with certain people I work with about this. It is like there are people that want the Aquaman book to be about him in Atlantis saving ships.
We've seen that before at the same time.
Right.
And that's why I think this resonates so well, is because of what you're doing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. That's kind of how I feel. It's like I'm just coming at this a different way. So when we go back to that, or if we go back to that, it'll feel like, oh, look at the stuff he's gone through, and now we're back here,
Yeah.
and we're doing this stuff, and so it's very intentional. It's hard though, because you do hear those voices outside, and you're like, oh man, it's hard to block that out and try to just tell the story you want to tell and have fun doing it. So with Aquaman, more than anything, I found myself having a lot of fun. It is definitely, people that follow me online know that I'm like a nut for like 80s bad fantasy movies and just canon films and stuff like that.
Same.
Yeah, so there's like a vibe of like high fantasy that goes along with this, and adventure and quips and big moments and stuff like that. And so I'm playing that, and it usually builds to something, usually. But I'm having a lot of fun, and I don't know. I mean, there's been some great Aquaman runs, but it's never a character that I've really gravitated toward. But I'm finding myself loving Arthur now. Same thing with the Green Lantern. It was something that I loved. It was my first credit on television. I loved Jeff Johns and Tomasi's run. That was awesome. But it wasn't like my first go-to comic book. It wasn't the character that I loved. But then you fall in love with these characters to the point where when they took me off Flash, I was so depressed. And I was like, oh my God.
36 issues. That was your baby.
Well, I was terrified. I was like, what's going to happen to the kids?
Yeah,
like that's how
I think do I see them on the weekend?
Where they go, yeah.
I was just so kind of obsessed with it, and I think you do as a creator. You're trying to put a lot of you in there, and you're trying to tell stories, and you're trying to have fun, and you have to weigh that between what editorial wants you to do, and you have to fight on things and not fight on other things, and then there's a crossover event, and like how do I tie into the crossover event? So it's a juggling act. But at the end of it, like with Arthur, I just find myself going, this guy's so awesome. And he does come from a kind of weird, broken home in a way. And he has had all these titles thrust upon him, and then that's been taken away. And so this is like a journey of, I think on issue 9, people are going to go, dude, Aquaman is seriously leveled up in a way that's intimidating. So that's my hope anyways.
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, the 80s science, and issue number 2, you have him going through a desert, and it's very Land of the Lost. And then you get that really badass moment where he figures out to bend. And like you said, he's very novice at it, of course, which I think is even a better thing, because while people may be saying, at least to me, oh, there's no Atlantis is very prevalent. The whole plot is him going to finding his people of Atlantis, finding Mira. And you're right, he's collecting along the way. And then I thought even in, the latest issue there where they're going through the market, they find Nemo. And then I love how he gets captured, and that whole, the shark character that gets introduced there.
Yeah.
It's very, that's the vibes I was picking up. I think that's why I also mesh with it so well, as well. Yeah. Okay. He's not sitting at Atlantis brooding over a throne.
Right.
I think that's what makes it great, because he's out of his element and he's finding his way and he's finding his powers. And this is as much I think going to be a vital piece to the future of Aquaman and how he grows going forward. Lauren, I'll let you speak on it too, as somebody who's newer to Aquaman, what you're kind of picking up from this book as well.
No, I'm absolutely loving it. And because I have a big issue with the fact that any superhero that cares about the ocean is made fun of. I mean, look at the Deep. He's a prime example of a parody
the Deep
of Namor and Aquaman. But they, obviously The Boys exaggerates everything to an extreme. But as someone who loves the ocean and is big on ocean conservation, and these characters are constantly mocked. And then, you've seen different iterations, like the one in Smallville was...
Right.
It was fun. I love that he went to UM, being from Miami and everything. And Jason Momoa's killed it as well. Yeah. But obviously they did make fun of him at points. And I didn't like when he threw that bottle into the ocean, because I feel like Aquaman wouldn't have done that.
Right.
But I thought that this was great, because it was a great combination of being badass, being intelligent, and being funny. And it was funny because, I read this after I met you, and we had a fun conversation, and we were laughing and joking and whatnot. And as soon as he made a joke, even when he was in a dire situation, I was like, okay, that actually sounds like Jeremy, the Jeremy that I got to talk to for a little bit. And it's kind of nice to see the the personality played through this badass character that the writer's putting into it. So I'm really loving it, and the artwork is, I mean,
John Timms
gorgeous.
and also
it's beautiful.
The inks and the colors by Rex Locus the colors are really fantastic.
Absolutely,
but I didn't think that, like, a lot of times when I'm writing these things, I didn't think the Lady of the Lake. I was like, oh, well, I like her. Let me just keep her around. And then it was like Lori Lemaris is like, it became these kind of like hunting mercenaries. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. And then the hard part is I fall in love with these characters. I'm like, well, let's just keep them around. Like the hammerhead shark guy, immediately my editor's like, we got to keep that guy around. I go, he's pretty cool. He's pretty cool, like, so you tend to, it is funny because it's just a little to the side of what I think people expect from an Aquaman book. But I also want them to enjoy who Aquaman is. I did this with Green Lantern a great deal. It was like, I want you to know who Hal is, so that when this gets bigger and other people come in, that you're along for the ride. Because if you don't know who Hal is, and by the way, when I started, everybody was just like, I hate Hal. I hate him. And I was like, Jeez. Why do you hate him? Like, that's the job. I have to get people to like him. And
right.
And with Aquaman, there is a little bit of that, like, oh, he's so dumb. I do think Jason Momoa like took some of that stink off,
Yeah, agreed.
Being like awesome. But I think part of it is you have to get him out of the environment that you're used to seeing him in. Like, if he's on Earth and he's doing stuff, it's inevitably going to be Black Manta. It's inevitably going to be this. It's going to be this. Superman's going to show up, whatever, And it's like, I just want a little me time. I want a little Arthur time, like a little step away from what we all know as readers, so that you're forced to just go, who is this guy? This is kind of an interesting character,
Agreed. And I mean, you even tease a little bit without going spoiler wise, but you do tease some new God action. Is that going to come into play later in the arcs, or is that just teasing us for something bigger crossover wise?
Do you mean in regards to the Omega Gate and stuff like that?
Yes.
So if you're reading DC continuity right now, you know that Darkseid has appeared and has exploded and has created the absolute universe. And there is an element of that Darkseidness that is directing both universes in a way. And so I am playing into that quite a bit. And there will be, the way that I think of the DC universe, there's a lot of push and there's a lot of pull. And so if there's a lot of this, then there might be a lot of that. And so it is not a direct, like, okay, but there, I'm trying to say this correctly, but there will be enough of those threads that I think will play out in
that's exciting.
Other books and what will happen coming in DC Comics.
So if they want something crossovered, how much time do they give you to plan for that, so that you can properly continue your story but make the crossover make sense?
It depends. Like, I had been told like a year ago, or like, let's say Absolute Power. I was told like a year or something and a half before that they were going to do this but they said, but don't worry, you don't have to cross over. I said, sure. And, but I worked in the story. I was like, I know they're going to do this crossover. I know that they're going to ask me. I know it. And I can't refuse it because I'm a nerd. But I know that they're going to go, we actually need you to cross over, whatever. And I'm like, great. Because I already I've already put
good news.
Yeah. And I tried to do that because even like with Night Terrors, it was like that was issue.
I love that whole
run. I did issue 1 and 2, and they were like, we have a crossover, and I was like, oh gosh, like I don't even get a chance. But they're like, you don't have to write it. I'm like, well, I'm not letting anybody else write it.
Right.
Like, my Green Lantern tie-in, I was like, I got to write it because I'm telling a story here. So I like the way that I approach crossovers, and at least people have been very complimentary about it. Is it has to be a book that if you're collecting this book, it does not take you out of that story. I don't want it to be a complete, side quest. It needs to be about that story. And number 2, it has to be additive to the other story. So it has to give you a piece of it so that you can be interested in what's happening in that other story. With Green Lantern, I did it, and it was like, here's Jadestone, here's Alan Scott, here's stuff that's happening on Oa. Like, I added a bunch of stuff, and then I took those toys and I kept them, So it's like Jadestone's still in there. But yeah, I usually get a whiff of the crossovers And then I always get these kind of like, do you want to be part of it? And I'm always just like, well, maybe yes,
Yeah,
but
I think I
what is
would
it?
like this.
You know, like,
Right.
yes, but what is it is always my question. And that second question sometimes gets answered right away and sometimes doesn't.
Like,
But
you'll see. You're like, dang.
yeah, I can turn things around really, really quick. That's one of my superpowers is I have a billion ideas and I can write incredibly fast.
Oh, that's a special talent, man.
I know, for real.
It,
But
that's how
I,
my animation career has gone.
I was
oh,
going to
yeah.
say, speaking of crossovers, this might be
Yep.
a good
I
time
know
to
Lauren's been waiting. Segue it in, Lauren. Take us
segue
away.
into, but you didn't
Yes.
just do Scoobynatural, so I have some questions for the other episodes you
Sure.
did too. But of course,
Yeah.
we'd start with Scoobynatural. That was one of the ways I convinced Matt to actually watch
I watched it out of
Supernatural.
order. I love Scooby Doo so much.
Well, I
Yes.
rewatched the episode before telling him to watch it to make sure, because he was probably like on season 5 or something when we watched it, and I was
very
like, it's a
early on, yeah.
standalone episode, so you can watch it completely by yourself. In fact, my 12-year-old's watched that episode multiple times, and she doesn't watch Supernatural.
That's awesome.
So how did that come about? I know we talked about it a little bit at MegaCon, but that's lost footage that will never be found. So yeah, how did Scooby? I mean, obviously there's so many Scooby-Doo references in Supernatural throughout the years.
Right.
Were you a fan of the show beforehand, or did you jump in for this?
No, I saw the first episode as it aired, and I was like kind of nutty about it because it's definitely like an old school type show I'd used to watch, like a Stephen Canal show, these kind of road shows. And I was like, two brothers in a car listening to classic rock, killing demons is like, that is written for me. And I loved the show. And what's interesting about it is Andrew Dabb, who's another writer, him and I were friends. I was working out as a producer's assistant, and my cousin came to me and says, hey, I know this friend of mine in Utah wants to be a writer. You got to read one of his scripts. And I remember reading one of his scripts. I'm like, gosh, this is freaking great. And I got in contact with him and we became friendly. And then he started doing some comics. And then fourth season, he got on Supernatural. I remember he came out. I took him to Sizzler. I was totally jealous. And he got on Supernatural and he stayed there forever, right?
A lot of them seem to.
Yeah. So he's on Supernatural. I love the show. And I've been watching, that was must watch. It was like Buffy, Angel, Supernatural, those type of things. Always in my veins. So I was working at Warner Brothers and I had done some Scooby-Doo stuff, and they were like, they were going to do a Scooby-Doo Hulk Hogan thing. And then they were also doing a Scooby-Doo Dukes of Hazzard thing. And then the Confederate flag thing like blew up, and they're like, yeah, we can't do that at all.
Oh, yeah.
And then Hulk Hogan got caught saying all these racist
and Hulk
things.
Hogan just, oh my gosh, yeah, that's
so then they go, we can't do that. We need some Scooby-Doo crossover stuff. I go, you guys got to do Supernatural. And they're like, what are you talking about? I go, you got to do Supernatural. And to quote, like one of the executives was like, that's the stupidest idea ever. And I was like, okay. Well, Jim Krieg, who's my mentor friend, over the next maybe year or two, I would be like, we should do Scooby-Doo Supernatural. Look, here's a meme. Here's this. It's just it absolutely fits together.
It's perfect.
It does.
Jim is considered the Scooby-Dooologist. He's done tons of Scooby-Doo. He knows it inside and out. And so Andrew became the showrunner for Supernatural in season 13. Or no, I think like season 12, maybe. I don't remember. One of those. And I was talking to Jim. I had sent him a meme, a Supernatural Scooby-Doo meme. I'm like, look at this. I'm telling you, And he goes, well, why don't you pitch it to your friend to see if we can do it as an episode? And I'm like, I've talked to him about trying to do this. I'm sure I have. And I said, if I call him up and say this, then you have to get the president of Warner Brothers Animation to say yes. And he's like, no problem. I'm like, oh, yeah.
No problem. Well, easier said than done. Do you realize how long I've been asking for this?
But I am telling you right now, I've never had a project like this where it was yeses from beginning to end. So I called Andrew up. I said, hey, would you ever want to do a Scooby-Doo Supernatural crossover where they jump into a cartoon? He's like, holy crap, I would love to do that. Let's do it. I hang up and I call Jim. I'm like, well, you better go over to Sam Register's office and pitch him on this thing. He goes, all right. He hangs up. He walks across, and on Entertainment Weekly is Jensen and Jared on the cover on top of the Impala. And he just grabs the book, walks into his office and goes, this is what we should do. They want to do this as a crossover. What do you think? And he's like, I love it. And we're like, okay. So now we're like, everybody said yes, but nobody's talked about money. And Bobby was the head of like production. We have a meeting with Supernatural with Bob Singer and Andrew. They're on a call. And this is when you start to see how much money live action uses and how much money animation uses. And
Mm.
so we say, she's like, this is how much it's going to cost to the animation. And I hear this pause, and they're like, well, that's how much we spend on music. And so it was like, oh,
Oh,
okay. But this is the problem. The problem was we would have to wait until they got a pickup. So they thought they were going to get an early pickup, but at season 13, you never know. And we would have to write it a year in advance and like get the animation going right away because that's how long it goes. So
Mm.
Jim and I jumped on it because Jim and I co-wrote it together, and Jim and I were like, we this and this, and so we had it prepped, fingers crossed, like let's. And then they got an early pickup. We had the thing turned in incredibly quick. They announced it at the upfronts. People went absolutely bananas. I was streaming. Jim was in an audio booth watching their voice record in Vancouver. I was at home watching their voice record from Vancouver, and it was super surreal. Like, it's incredibly surreal.
yeah.
Already Jim was like, well, hopefully we get to go up to Vancouver, for the
Mm.
recording. Like, you're going to let us go up, right? And he was, because that's Jim. He's just constantly trying to.
That'd be something I do. Like, so
Oh,
what if we
yeah.
did this?
So we kept thinking they were going to stop us. I mean, I cannot tell you. We wrote the script, we turned it in, we got a notes call, and we're like, oh, this is where they're going to stop us. And then every note was like, you remember on page 25, and we'd go there, and they'd be like, that was great. And we're like, okay. And then turn like page 35, and they're like, that's hysterical. There were no like, we need to change anything notes. We were just
Mm-hmm.
perplexed. Like, we're like, this never happens. Like, this is crazy. And then the animation started coming back, and it was gory. Like, Spike Brandt directed all the animation, and he's showing these characters being vivisected and stuff. And we're like, they're not going to let us do this with Scooby Doo. Like, I thought for sure they weren't going to let us do the existential crisis or like,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And like every step, they're like, yeah, that's great. Oh, that's great. That's great. We're like, what is happening right now? Like, this is going way too well. And so then we go to Vancouver for the record or the filming. And then immediately Jim's like, I hope we can make it in the background somewhere. So when Jensen says Scooby Dooby Doo, you can see Jim and I over his shoulder.
Ah.
And we're sitting there, and I remember when Jensen came down and he's wearing the ascot, and we're like, this is nuts.
And he actually looks at the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you even get Dean curses at Fred.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, they even did that because they only do that a handful of times in the whole show with the
Yeah.
beeping out or the cutting to something else. So I was like,
It was
wow.
so meta, we were able to, and then they premiered it at the Paley Fest, and I've never had an experience like that where like thousands of people
Wow.
are laughing at your stuff. And what I think what was funny is my wife hadn't watched the show. I don't think she knew who these guys were. And we were in the green room, and I went to introduce her to Jensen and Jared. And what people don't know is like Jared's really tall, but like he's a giant. Jensen's still like 6'3" or something. And Jared
Jensen's
just
not short.
huge.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I introduced her to them, and her literally, she was like, hi. Like that. It was super like, really? In front of me? Like, that's brutal, but they're the most lovely people. They're all so amazing. Misha, all those guys, everybody in Supernatural, the cast, the crew, everybody's unbelievable. So after that aired, and it obviously was received very well, Andrew called me and he said, hey, we want to put you on season 14. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm thrilled. They said, we're going to have a spot open up because of the spin-off show that they tried to do, Wayward Sisters or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lawyer. We were getting ready I was going to move over to season 14, and then it didn't go. And so that spot didn't open up, and so I didn't get on season 14. And I was heartbroken because I really wanted to be on it. So then season 15, the last season, they let me on, and he's like, okay, so like your job, you do not worry about anything in the mythology, or you don't worry about any of the story, the meta art. Like, your job is to do weird things. I go, here's 10 weird episodes. and I'll start with the least weirdest to the most weirdest. And I went through all, and I said the first one, they were like, "That's too weird," and I was like, "Uh-oh." And I like
it's only gonna get weirder from
Too
here,
weird
man.
for Supernatural.
I went through all 10, and they were like, these are wacky, like I had this great Terminator one with Charlie, played by Felicia Day. The Tin Man was cutting people's hearts out and putting on the chest looking for somebody named Charlie. And Andrew's like, yeah, we can have this small person go, get in if you want to live. Like, and Bob Singer was like, no, we're not doing Oz, and I was like, okay. And so I even tried to pitch them on Super Hulock, which was hilarious. And they were like, Jeremy,
oh
what
my
are
gosh.
you doing for like, you're pitching for 2007, Tumblr. And I'm like,
yeah, but then you could have brought Crowley back. He could have been, the American from Doctor Who.
I had it all mapped out. I was like, we can get David Tennant. I know guys at DuckTales.
Oh my gosh, if you'd gotten David Tennant, that would have been crazy.
They were like, yeah, but we're not going to get Benedict Cumberbatch. And I'm like, yeah, but what's his face from the Sherlock television show, or the
on Netflix,
whatever, the guy who was married to Angelina Jolie, like his show ended, and I was like, we can get him, like, and they were like, you're effing nuts, So I had probably, like, I had pitched literally 10 the first time, and they were bananas, and the second time I probably had 20 different ideas, and they were crazy. And so they kind of only went with the tamer ideas. I was like, well, can we do a Roadhouse episode with Christian Kane? Because I'm a big, I not only love Christian Kane's music, but I loved him on Angel. I was a huge Angel fan. I love Leverage, Secondhand Lions. I knew he was friends with Jensen. I knew they've sung together. Jensen's a great singer. Oh, yeah. And I was like, well, I can do this thing kind of Roadhouse style. It was also me trying to convince them to let me be part of the bar fight, but they wouldn't. And the fact that they let us do like the Dukes of Hazzard theme song, which I thought was hilarious. And that was really great. And I was up there and I was watching Jared. The other thing you have to know is, like, contractually, like, you can only use certain people so many times. Like, Misha can only be in certain episodes. Like, he could never be in my episodes because my episodes didn't have to do with overarching plot. And like Jared was going to go to a concert or something, so he couldn't be in that episode. So we're like, knock him out again, And
he should have permanent brain damage.
Totally.
When in doubt, knock him out.
Yeah.
Like, I would be on set and I would watch Christian and I would watch Jensen, and they were so good together. And Christian's such a great actor, nuanced. People think of him in a certain way, but he's such a good nuanced actor. And Jensen, I've said it before, but like it's rare I've had that much respect for somebody, especially an actor. But he kind of leads the team in a lot of ways, and everybody kind of looks to him because him and Jared have been doing that for 15 years.
Forever, yeah.
They're really the ones that are the mainstays. So they're remarkable. And then when I did the Mrs. Butters episode, which came from, I think it was Jensen's stand-in. It was Jensen or Jared's stand-in. We were just talking about different things. And he was talking about how, like, we never really got to see what happened to the telescope or like different parts of the thing. And so I was like, that's a good idea. And so, Mrs. Butters and being able to do this thing that's, having holidays and having some little happy moments, because I knew what was coming down the pipe from the writers. Right. And that's why it's called Last Holiday or Last.
Last Holiday. Yeah, and Last Call and Last Holiday.
Last Holiday.
Yep. So I was like, okay, Last Holiday. And I love Mrs. Butters. Originally, I was trying to get Barbara Eden, who played the genie in I Dream of Jeannie. Yeah. But she did, this girl did an amazing job. And having little holiday scenes were hilarious. Mm-hmm. And having just like brief moments of fun, before it all gets crazy. And I love the Men of Letters headquarters, and I thought, there's so much we can do here. There's so much that I want to know what happens with the map. So I was like, I'm putting that in. Like, that's the good thing. You explored some
of the lore there.
Yeah.
There was so much lore that never gets discovered, and that's what you did. And I'm like, hell yeah, thank you. We're finally, because my first watch was we're finally doing this. Yeah.
Well, and whose idea was it to actually bring the Mjolnir back, which we hadn't seen since the auction?
I was like, I don't understand, man. And I remember talking to Andrew about it. He was like, dude, he killed gods with this thing. Like, this is the thing he should pull out in the first moment of any battle, like this thing, And he's like, whatever, dude. I'm like, we got it. And so I had to. So the way I pitched or the way I wrote it too was like I'm always because I was new to live action, so there was a certain element of learning how they're doing certain things, and I'm thinking, how can I save money? Like my second episode versus my first episode is so drastically different in terms of where they were spending money, and so you'll see that it's them kicking in the doors with their gun, their weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the first one is with the guns, maybe, and the second one is with like the angel blades and stuff like that. And then the third one just explodes, and Jensen comes in with a grenade launcher, and he has Mjolnir. And I was like, I wanted this series of projections, and it was great because I said to Bob, I was like, all you have to do is set up three doors. Like just doors, and you can have the camera and just come over and do this shot, and then do this shot, and do this shot, and you're done. And he was like, I like that. Like you could tell the production mind. He was like, I like that. And so even when we were shooting that, I was going behind there because I knew the show was ending, and I was like, what are you guys doing with Thor's hammer? Like I was trying to figure out who was taking it, and it's heavy. It was freaking heavy, and I was like, this is awesome. So that was really fun, and it was a callback, and I there were things like that I kept going, what happened to this or what happened to this? But that was a product of having watched the show the entire time. And I do that in comic books all the time. I do all these callbacks, and I'm always picking the bones of plot holes and strange things. In Green Lantern, I made a reference to Millennium, which was a crossover event when I was a kid. And there are just pieces of lore, especially with Supernatural, that I'm kind of like, well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And I would love to tie a bow on this. And, so yeah.
It's nice treats for the fans that have been around forever, because that was such a cool thing to see. And also there was more than one Scooby-Doo reference in that episode, so I'm assuming that was because we see the TV, Mrs. Butters fixes the TV that was broken, the underwear obviously, and then the pajamas. So how did that go over? Was that specifically written in there that he's going to wear the Scooby-Doo pajamas?
I mean, I wrote 3 episodes, right? So I wrote Scoobynatural with my buddy Jim, and then I wrote these other 2 episodes, Last Holiday, and I was like, well, she's a genie, so I've got to have a callback to Scoobynatural. And we also, like, the Dean Cave, they built this room, and we're like, this is freaking awesome. And then they got rid of it, and I was like, I love the idea that he has his own little man cave in the middle of things. So having her like fix it, even if it's off camera, I was like, this is great. This is great because I in my head I'm fixing things, and then it was really funny to have the pajamas because Jensen comes in and he obviously like plays it up in a way that like it's really funny, where Jared's like, oh gosh, he's like, this is really airy, and it was just such a
and he flashes him.
It was such a silly piece of it. And then we got like, I was like, oh, can we get the Ghostbusters song, not the main one, but the other one when they're doing, they're running around doing this stuff. And again, you'll see these repeated scenes that they only have to shoot the same scene over and over, and you cut it together in this montage that really, I think, worked great. And it was like, we've got this, and it was ironic because it's like, here it is, the last couple of episodes, and now the map works, and like, you're telling me this tells me where monsters are? Like, I can just, and I love that because it hinted at this whole other lore about Supernatural. And so it was really, really fun. It was really fun. And that was a great, and I got to meet Eduardo, who did the second one, was a co-director on Blair Witch.
Oh, wow.
And so hearing his stories about the Blair Witch Project and how that went was crazy too. And
wow.
What a phenomenon.
Wasn't that was like a UCF student film, wasn't it? It was like filmed here in Florida, or not, it wasn't.
The whole phenomenon.
Or maybe part of it was in Florida. I know. I have a friend that got like nightmares from that. But
oh
God, I remember.
LA, they released it in LA. I had just moved to LA, and they were releasing it it was like a bootleg, and they said it was a snuff film. It was like an amazing viral marketing, and so we all watched this thinking, oh my God,
it was real.
It's real.
Yeah.
And when you watch it on TV, you get much more of the vibe than if you're watching it in the theater, because it's like, oh, it's in the theater. This was like, oh no, that's the TV, and it looks like it's shot on a video camera, like it's a home video,
Right.
it was really, really, really neat. So
Yeah, I believe, oh, nobody quote me on this, but I believe it did the wonders for the UCF Film School. Like, I have a
oh,
friend
that's
who
cool.
actually, he writes TV shows and whatnot for like Netflix or movies for Netflix, and he specifically went to school there. I'm like pointing because it's like 5 minutes down the
Oh,
road
that's
from
cool.
Yeah, I
me.
was like, what are you pointing
My
at? Like, are
daughter
you in
goes
the
there.
dorm room, right? Like,
That's
what do
Yeah,
awesome.
you?
UCF. No, my daughter goes
That's
to
awesome.
UCF.
My old pal
Um,
UCF.
but yeah, so in Last Call, so throughout the show, we've seen Dean sing, but never well. And we've seen him
Right,
make comments about,
right,
there's no singing in Supernatural. I
right.
listened to the Then and Now podcast, so I've heard Kripke say, like, we've had to put in the script before, like, make sure Dean
Yeah.
sings off key. So
Yeah.
was there any pushback with having him
No,
sing? I love it.
no, surprisingly. And I always chalked it up to the strange little creature that he was using to make everything a little more um, better in this bar.
Mm,
Like the bar was this mainstay, but you had to feed this thing, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
so in
yeah.
my mind, it was this kind of emanating thing where like everything's good. As long as you keep feeding the animal, everything's good. And that's one of the tip-offs is like, hey, but also selfishly, I wanted to hear Jensen sing well, you know. And I thought, well, this is one of those things that not everybody that watches the show knows. Fans know. Fans
right.
know that he's an incredible singer. But it was also, I want, listen, selfishly, I wanted to see Christian and him sing. And the fact that it ended up being a Dukes of Hazzard theme song was like nostalgia bait for me.
Yeah.
And it was their band. It was all the guys from the crew that were the band members. And here I am sitting here watching them do it, and they were phenomenal. And I remember they recorded it, and we were listening to the live stream. I still have the recording, which
Oh,
I'll
wow.
occasionally
That's really
play.
cool.
And they would pipe it in, and you're just listening to this, and you're like, this is insane. So,
That's
like in terms of the mythology of it, it's like, yes, there's this thing downstairs that's doing all this stuff, and that's why this guy's doing great, and he's going to keep
Ah,
that kind of lottery ticket going, even if he has to kill his friend. And
yeah.
that's the uncover how he uncovers it. And there's just this moment. It's one of my favorite moments in anything I've done, mainly because Christian sells it so well. Is Dean stabs him,
mhm.
and there's this moment where Christian like pats him, and
Oh yeah.
he's just like it's okay, like I know, like this is,
Right.
and and even on the day I was like, holy crap, he's really good at this, you know.
So you got to be on set for the film, for the episodes that you write. Do you
Yeah,
get to
well,
have,
they don't normally send. I paid for myself to go. I was like,
oh, wow.
I
I
want
would
to
too.
go. I want to have that experience. I want to have that set experience. I have become very friendly with the people that work there. I was, it just like it was great. Being on set's way more fun than writing. So it's like being there and and it's weird because I'm in animation predominantly. As a writer, you don't have that big of a voice in most of the things you do. You write the script, you turn it over, and that is, you get notes,
Right.
you write it again, etc. In live
Mm,
action, you have a little more power, which is not to say I knew that, but people asking me my opinion, I'm just like, I
You're
don't know.
like
But
me?
yeah,
What?
but like I said, I think it's just fascinating. I think, and I have such an affinity. I don't think anybody could pick me up out of a lineup. Like, I don't think Jensen or Jared could be like, hey, that's the guy. Like, I don't. But I love those guys. I have such an affection for them. I think that, they both have done well, will continue to do well. I think they both should be, Jensen should be a movie star. Jared
Oh
should be
yeah.
like, they should be doing movies. I mean, Jared already had kind of a movie career, even after Gilmore Girls, which I really loved. And
I loved his Friday the 13th. Like
yeah,
honestly, like I would have loved to see more of that. I
yeah,
absolutely adored him in that.
he's such a monster. Like, I want to
Yeah.
see him go take on Reacher, like, or something,
Yeah.
mm.
like he's such a big dude. But anyways, he was doing Walker, and they've obviously landed on their feet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And now
they're
we're
doing
going to
okay.
see all of them together in The Boys here shortly.
I know. And
I'm
Misha
very
too.
excited
And
for that.
Misha's
Yeah.
the sweetest human being ever. I was striking with Misha and Felicia Day, and they're like, again, you're talking about these incredibly, incredibly nice people.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, and that seems to be part of why the show went on for so long.
I
Because
think
I mean,
so.
because
just
I've
the
went to my
environment.
first Supernatural con this past November. I listened to the Then and Now podcast, so like I hear the camaraderie and the love for each other. And we've had Ryan Curtis on here who worked on season 7 and 8. He did some special
Yeah.
effects, or it's not called special effects,
He did
visual
the
effects.
visual
Oh, that's
effect.
cool.
Yes.
And we heard the same thing from him, that it was just even the crew and the cast and everybody just
So
kind of loves
they're
each
so
other.
family.
And
I wish Jared had more comedy. He's so funny.
Right,
Like
in real
you're
life.
such a funny guy in real life that you're like, oh gosh,
When
I would love to.
MegaCon, he was cracking everybody up at his
Yeah,
He
panel.
was. I was standing there waiting, standing there next to him. Just
funny.
the interactions he had with everybody, and it was really really cool. And I was trying to get him to like stand up and talk to somebody so I could just see how tall, because I'm 6'4". So
So
I was
tall.
like,
Oh
I
yeah,
wanted to be like, I want to
yeah,
see how we stack up. But
yeah, 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 yeah.
at a con, I'm going to do that. But I mean, you say that they couldn't pick out of a lineup, but I think with the actors, obviously they got to act, they got to sell. But without good writing, you know, they can't make it work at the same time. And so I think that's a testament to the episodes. There's a reason why these episodes are, you know, notoriously some of the people's favorites, like Scoobynatural and things. It's a testament to the writing. And I think, you know, you've really nailed it, coming from that place of fanship and just doing it justice. And so thank you for, you know,
Oh
getting to share that love as well.
yeah. I wish my only sadness is I didn't get to do it more.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe they'll revive it again soon.
Oh,
Lauren, you're
I
Ugh,
amazing.
tried to convince them.
they talk about it.
I tried to convince them to do. Originally, the plan was like, Jensen was gonna or Dean was gonna die and go into like there was gonna be this restaurant. And everybody was gonna be there. Everybody.
Oh, I
And
think I.
I said, listen, man. I remember this was before COVID though, and I was like, just film. Everybody's gonna be there. Just film a 30 seconds of Misha bursting in the door, going like, Sam, Dean, I need you. Like that's it. It's like a
Yes.
Doc
Oh,
Brown
that
thing.
would have been
And,
amazing.
and then in 5 years, when we all need jobs, you release that thing, and people lose their minds. And then the call is, we got to do this again.
We need it to come back on like Prime or something so they can do all the things they couldn't do before. Because they pushed the
Yeah.
envelope for the CW, man. They pushed it
I
as
thought,
far as they
yeah, for
could.
CW, they definitely did.
Yeah, I mean, and all the even the dirty. I mean, so many dirty jokes. I feel like they named Dick Roman Dick just so they could make those jokes, and it was brilliant.
Totally.
But I mean, I could keep you here all night. But I just have one last question. So you just mentioned COVID, and Mrs. Butters' episode actually came out after that hiatus, but it was, I think, filmed beforehand, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So was there any rewriting or anything that had to be done with any of the previous episodes?
Not on that one. I mean, I believe the last couple episodes, like one or two of the last episodes, had to be massively rewritten in a lot of ways, because we were one of the first shows to go back in production, if not the first.
Right,
I mean,
because you guys had to wrap it up.
Yeah, we were literally we all got our plane tickets to go to Vancouver for the wrap party.
Aww.
and we were all just gonna have this huge blowout. Everybody in Supernatural was gonna be there, and then it was like, COVID's happening, so suddenly everybody was getting really scared, and then some people were getting private jets, and then suddenly it was like, oh, and I'm like, hey, I'll be fine, I'll blow over in a week, and then it was like, oh, we're not doing this at all.
None of us knew what was really coming at that time, I think,
right.
too.
And
Sure.
it not only did it not do it all, and then they went back and they were like, okay, we can go back to production, we can shoot this, but it has to be limited amount of people and limited amount of this and limited amount of that. And so they
quarantining and COVID testing. I heard Kansas was supposed to be in the finale, but they couldn't have this band quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yeah, there was supposed to be the house band at the bar, the rest thing. It was going to be awesome.
The more I hear that in like convention clips and whatnot, the more I'm just like, ugh.
I know.
Just hurts your heart.
Man.
Yeah, I know. And it was a good, but it was sad because it would have been, no one really got to say goodbye.
That's my biggest thing, is that's what it seems like, is nobody really got to say the goodbye I think everybody deserved after so long.
I mean, as a fan, I feel like I didn't get to say goodbye to the show properly, so I can't even fathom having worked on it. And I didn't start watching the show until 2016. Yeah.
You never know, guys. I mean, like,
I was a late bloomer.
That's true. Buffy's coming back. I'm just saying. I'm holding out hope.
But aren't they recasting Buffy?
No,
I never watched it.
She's gonna
Sarah Michelle Gellar will be in there? Okay.
Slayer. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to call it Buffy. I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see. But I know, like Lauren said, we can keep here all night. I really appreciate you hopping on. Why don't you wear any upcoming conventions? I know you've been a traveling man lately. Do you wear?
Oh yeah, not really. I have San Diego. I have Terrific Con in August. Salt Lake Fan X, and that's in August or September. I forgot.
Yeah, that one's usually September. We've been to that one actually.
Yeah, I haven't been to that one. And
it's a good show.
Okay,
it's
cool.
a very good one.
I'll probably be in San Diego. That I haven't missed it for ages, except for my daughter's birth. So I'll probably be there. But other than that, I'm just online, usually on Space Kicker on Instagram or X, and that's about it.
Nice. Well, again, dude, thank you so much for getting to hang out with us. And I know Terrificon's up there, Connecticut. That's a really good show for comic
I
creators.
heard
They
it's
love
awesome.
that
I'm
one.
super excited.
I'm from right up in that area in Mass, so if you need suggestions, I mean, even with Salt Lake City, I've gone there a bunch living out in Idaho.
So many
You know where to
breweries to
find
walk
us. Yeah,
to.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
It's
cool
dangerous.
spots. And everybody, go check out Aquaman. I don't know what you're doing if you haven't checked
much.
Aquaman out. And Green Lantern Corps is another really good run. So thank you for making some of the great comics. And Lauren, any final thoughts?
No, Mrs. Butters is one of my most underrated favorite episodes. Thank you so much for giving us some light at the end of that season. There are some phenomenal episodes, and any of you who watched Supernatural and didn't finish it, go finish it. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, I can't imagine going through all that time and not finishing in a series. But
there's some gems in the last season, man. Hero's Journey is another great. I mean, so many great ones in season 15.
But thank you guys so much. Make sure Hops Geek News is where you can find us. And I'm not sure if I'll be at San Diego or not, to be determined. But other than that, we'll be at some upcoming conventions. Maybe I'll hit up my family.
I'll be at MegaCon 2026.
Lauren and I'll be at MegaCon again. That's like our home show there. But thank you again, and we'll talk to you guys here soon. Cheers.